worn down by time. Things get shaky. They crumble, fall apart. So, build it. Build it so you can lay down your head at night, knowing you've done all you can. Build it strong enough to withstand the rain, the flood, and the storm. Build it when the world is uncertain. And nothing is guaranteed. You can build a life that's built to last.
Good morning, everyone. How are you guys doing? Thank you for joining us for our Built to Last podcast. This is Jerry Garner, and I'm Ricky Mosel, and we are the teaching pastors of Destination Church, and we thank you so much for joining us today. This podcast is a conversational style Bible study that we do to help you guys become a student of God's Word. We always start out every week by encouraging you to not just read the Bible, but to dive into it and to study it and get to know it. We believe if you get in the Word, then the Word will get in you, and you will live out what it means to be a disciple or a follower of Jesus Christ and grow into His likeness. So we want to encourage you to become a student in the Word, and that's why we do this today, to help you explore and dive into and study the Bible. If you have any comments on what we are talking about today or any questions, you can place those in the comment section below, and then we will follow up with you as soon as possible. And today we're going to continue in our look on the book of James, and this is week number 3. So Pastor Jerry, why don't you open us up and talk about the book of James for us, where we're at today.
Yeah, so far we've made it to where we started doing the testing your faith. We're actually going to pick up in verse 5 today and try to get through 5 and 8. That's going to be the goal. We'll see if it happens. It says, if you lack any wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach. It will be given to him. But let him ask faith with no doubting, for one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For the person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded man and unstable in all of his ways. So, I mean, right here, lacking wisdom, I think, is one of the big ones. We've already been, the testing your faith. We're going to find out as we go through this. The book of James is a lot of trials, a lot about testing the faith.
Yeah.
The lacking wisdom, if we lack wisdom, we seek that from God, right? I think that's one of my favorite things that I like about Solomon was when God's like, what would you ask of me? The wisdom to lead a nation. Like, give me the wisdom, And I think wisdom is something that I don't think you can never have enough of. I really don't. And then I think it comes up the very question, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? And I always say knowledge is book smarts. Wisdom is that God got you through all that stupid stuff you did in your life, so now you're smart enough not to do it again.
Yeah.
There's a slight difference between the two.
Yes.
We often don't need wisdom until trial. I think that's one you really need to know if you've got wisdom. I think a lot of times just knowledge of how to handle a situation, and then once you're put into the situation, how do you respond to it? That's really the difference between knowledge and wisdom, because now you know what works and what doesn't work. I think particular trials, a lot of times it shows our perseverance. It shows, do we have faith? Are we able to drive through the process? And that actually requires, wisdom, but it's a wisdom of faith too. It's putting your knowledge into your faith, and once it's been put under trial, now you know your faith is right.
It's almost tempered.
It's tempered. Yeah. It's like tempered steel almost at that point. Yeah. So, I think that's where we're heading with this particular passage here, and then we'll kind of move on through it as we go. Anything you want to add to that one?
For me, I've always been told that wisdom is knowledge applied, which is a simplistic way to put it. Do you know what I'm saying? But I think the difference between it is and what he alludes to here in his book when he starts talking about wisdom, especially when he gets to the latter half of chapter 3 and he starts moving into 4, where he picks back up with that talk again.
Yep.
He really starts talking about like the skill of living, like wisdom is teaching you how to live. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not just obtaining information.
Yeah, so like knowledge is raw information, and wisdom is how to use the information.
Yeah, how to apply it so that you can learn to get better at living. You know what I'm saying?
And then you even have like I even got like knowledge is like the ability to take something apart, but wisdom is the ability to put it together.
Yeah, I like that.
You know, that's actually a very good point.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. That's really cool.
Which brings up a point, like, because I think I told you, and I don't talk to anybody. So
it had to have been me.
you know, it was funny. I was reading. I told you that my old abbot at the Zen Center, he actually wrote he finally wrote his book, and I was reading through it this morning actually, and it just made me think of that. And there was a part that it stood out to me because he grew up in, man, this would have been in the 60s. I mean, he's 70, I think he's 76, 77 now, something like that.
Wow.
So he grew up Midwest America, right? Grew up with your Methodist church, I believe is what he went to. And then he went to Zen Center when he went to college to go to Chicago. And when he went in, he said one of the first things that really jumped out at him was the fact that when he sat down to Zen, he wasn't listening to a sermon. He was actually putting something into practice in their life. Where Zen was, I sit here and I'm going to figure this out, where Christianity is, well, here's this sermon, and then we're like,
yep.
Walk off, right? And I was reading that this morning, and I had an epiphany. I put it down because, you know, we're redoing like discipleship and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it hit me, and I was just like, why aren't we putting things in place where somebody can actually go, oh, that applies to my life, and I can put this into work? And to me, that's where it's funny we're talking about this today, because I was actually thinking about it. I was like, there's a difference of the knowledge you give somebody in a sermon, and there should be a way for the wisdom for them to actually be able to put that in action in their life.
Right.
And I know people say, well, your sermon should be applicable. I'm like, no, it's not really the same thing. What we're talking about, he actually took out of it, and I know exactly what he's talking about. It's one of those things where you show up and they run you through all the rituals and the routines and all that, which, hey, churches, we don't generally do as far as, and even little things like, oh, your coffee's here, your seat's there, there's this, we stand when we read the Bible. We don't do any of that stuff. Like, you're just kind of like, we just hope you catch on, right?
Right.
And I'm not, if your church does do a good job with that, thank you. Send us an email so I could call and ask you questions. I mean, I'm just honest. So, but the idea that you could go in, read the Bible, and then literally apply it directly to your life. Like, how is this going to affect my life? How can I put this in everyday interaction? I really think that's something that needs to be explored.
Right.
Even more than what we think of, because when I was reading that this morning, it just hit me. I was like, I know that exact feeling. Like, I know exactly what he was talking about. You're like, if I can do this, then I'm going to see these XYZ results, right?
Yep.
And then when we come to Christianity and we're like, oh yeah, it's faith in Christ alone, which I'm a five solas guy.
Yeah.
Not going to argue that.
Right.
But to somebody who doesn't understand a Reformation theology, Reformed theology, doesn't understand that stuff, it's almost like, how do we get that to where it's tangible?
Right, of course.
And I think sometimes it's fascinating. It gets the gears going.
Yep.
And if you're somebody like me, when your gears get going, you can't sleep because you're still working on it, trying to figure it out.
Right. Yep.
So, like, I was actually looking at, like, you know, like, how do you get that knowledge into wisdom? And I think, you know, that's a very great question. And I don't know if anybody actually does that
I don't think
100%. Like,
I don't think people know how to. I think a lot of it is organically through relationships.
Yeah.
So the majority of time, because it can happen naturally and organically through a relationship, just through everyday conversations that you have with people. The instructor or the mentor doesn't know. You're just having conversation and you're answering questions and you're pointing things out, situational or circumstantial, and you don't know, maybe not even until years later, that all that time you have been
building
unintentionally and teaching them how to apply this to their life as they see the mixture of your conversation with your example showing them. Do you know what I mean? But that's not intentional. So it only happens accidentally, you know, and that's why it happens the majority of time through relationship, because that's really the only time that we unintentionally do that. Other than that, most churches are intentional about putting like we talked about yesterday, some type of plan or process or program in place. And it's, so your result is, if they go through these steps, then this result will happen. And you and I we know better. That's not the case. You know, just because you completed a checklist of 9 classes doesn't mean that you're going to be a disciple at the end of it, or you're going to be where everybody else is going to be that went through the 9 classes.
Well, I also think it's a way of, like, how do you actually integrate people into the entire process? Like, how do you get people to integrate? Like, how do you take somebody and get them to just to commit to reading the Bible 5 minutes a day? How do you get people to commit to daily prayer and meditation? And how do you get them into from that into the next step of, okay, well, now we're going to give you like a foundational level Bible study, and now we're going to take that to an intermediate level Bible study, and then an expert level. It's getting people in, because, you know, I think one of the biggest things is we forget was, it's not to go and meet disciples. It was to go and make disciples.
That's right.
So it's when you start looking at, like, the wisdom piece, like the knowledge of being able to pick a plan apart, or to pick the Bible phrase apart, right? Well, that's one thing. But how do you put it all back together and actually give a follower of Christ true wisdom?
Totally.
And I think that's a complicated question. And then, you know, like, I've read, like, I'm almost through the Calvin Institutes. Like, I mean, and if you want to read something challenging, I tell you, that's the one. I think it's 14 or 1,600 pages. I don't know.
Wow.
And I was just trying to read 3 or 4 pages a day, because I was like, this is in-depth stuff. So, but even after reading that, like, I could tell you what it is, but there's a difference of, well, okay, well, how do I put this together? And I think that's something that maybe a lot of Christians really worry. Like, you know, we go and, like, you know, me being on the outside looking in until I was into my late 30s, and as anybody knows me, knows I will pick a Christian apart in a heartbeat, because their arguments are so surface level that once you start picking it apart, as I heard a Irish pastor once tell an American pastor, you know, you Americans, your theology is like a lake that's 3 miles wide, but it's only 1 inch deep. Where then you start looking at it, you're like, yeah, because we like to just hit surface level problems. We're not digging into root cause. We're not digging into the sinful nature of men. We're not digging into your lustful desires. And what are the lustful desires? Why do you have them? Okay, well, now that we know why you have them, now we can attack it. Now we know what we're dealing with. And I think a lot of times people have gotten to where, well, no, I'm just trusting in the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, yes, 100%, we are. That's sanctification. But my point is, if you don't know what the Holy Spirit's will is by not studying the Bible, well, then you don't know what you're listening to.
And if you don't have anybody that's helping you create a craving or a desire to study that Bible so that you do find it. Think about this. Jesus was fully God and fully man. And he never intentionally went and decided he was going to preach to a crowd of thousands of people. If he preached to a crowd of thousands of folks, it was because they came to him. He never went and started a church. What did he do? I'm the creator of the world, and I'm going to reveal our Heavenly Father to the masses, and I'm going to do it through 12 dudes. So why are we trying to do it? Why are we trying to shepherd thousands of people when he shepherded 12?
Well, yeah, I mean, you got the 12 major ones, but I mean, he did have other disciples, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not, but he started out with those guys, and they started to create disciples, like you were saying.
And at the same point, though, like, I mean, at some point, we have to have enough wherewithal to go, I can't take on anyone else.
That's exactly right.
You know,
well, and you can if it's about quantity, and not quality. You suffer the quality of you helping shepherd other people. It lessens every time you add numbers to it, because now the shepherd has more sheep to keep up with.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And if you think, if Jesus chose 12, right? So that's our 12 seems like a reasonable number. And most studies today would even say that you really can't even do more than like 6 to 8. I mean, realistically,
that
like
close.
You're giving them, you know.
And then he had the 72 that he sent out. So they were disciples. Do you know what I'm saying? But they were not just being discipled by him. They were being discipled by the disciples as well. And that's the follow me as I follow Christ model. You know what I'm saying? Like, people can follow you and you can be their shepherd because Christ lives in you. So somebody that's in my church that says, well, I can't do what you do. Well, The same Jesus lives in you, lives in me. So if you were equipped to do so, you can't pastor a church of thousands of people, but that's what they're meaning. You know what I'm saying? But you can shepherd a handful of people.
You can. I mean, realistically, it also depends on how much time you're willing to put into it too.
That's exactly right.
I think that's the other thing too. It's we were talking about beforehand. The vicious cycle of life that, somewhere along the line we've bought this thing that we grow up, we go to school, we get brainwashed in school, we come out of school, and then we have to go immediately to college to get further brainwashed, or we got to go into the real world and get unbrainwashed so we're productive in society.
Right.
And then we go and we raise our 2.5 kids, hopefully, and you don't murder them, but your 2.5 kids. And then somewhere in there, towards the end of our life, we're no longer useful and we get pushed out to pasture and everything else. But it's this vicious cycle that at any point, Christians could just say, "Did enough." Our job was to go forth and make disciples. So it's really like, am I giving myself 20% to God? Am I giving myself 50% to God? Am I giving myself 100% to God? And nobody could answer that but you.
Yep.
Right. So I mean, that's a big thing. Like, are you willing? So are you going to continue to be on the great Dharma wheel, if you will, the wheel of life and death, where we're just constantly cycling, or do you go, well, Christ stopped that wheel. Christ stopped the wheel. I could go. Christ is my way. He is the path. He is the truth. He's the way.
Right.
I don't have to worry about it. I go to Him. But then you have to be able to break that and go back in and go, okay, well, how do I take a brand new person, first time coming to church, and get them to where they're reading the Calvin Institutes? Like, I mean, how do you take them from point A to get them to point B so we can pick it apart very easily? I think that's what most
figure it out, right?
Our most vision casters can
start
say,
with the end in mind.
This is where I want to get you. Okay, well then the wisdom comes. Well, how do we get you there?
Of course.
And I think that's a.
Well, if you would ask me that question, the most simplest answer I would give you is probably not the right answer or a full, complete answer, but the simplest answer I would give you is give me 3 years.
In patience.
Me and you, one-on-one, give me 3 years. Jesus went to 12 dudes. And he knew when he was going to ascend to the Father. He knew when he was going to be resurrected. And he, give me 3 years. Hey, you guys, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Give me 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And they discipled other people who became disciples during that time that they were together. Obviously, like I said, he had 72 to send out and he hadn't ascended to the Father yet. So it's not like you go through this 3-year regiment and then you start doing what he did for you. Do you know what I'm saying? But at the end of that 3 years, you're ready to take on the role of being the one that is equipping others to be discipled. And that's always been my pushback. My pushback is the guys who are the leaders and the equippers and the teachers, us, we say, how come you people aren't getting discipled? And I believe God is saying, no, you're my chosen method. Did you read 2 Corinthians 5:20? You're my ambassadors, not just to the lost, but as the shepherd to the sheep. You know what I'm saying? You are the ones I chose to equip these people to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? And that, I believe, Jesus did that through relationship. I think him being available for them to come and ask him questions that were stupid enough that he would go, oh, ye of little faith. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you have to have a relationship close enough that you have those moments with people. I know with you, personally speaking, with you and my relationship, I didn't realize how much more I could dive into the Word and grow closer to God. Like, I knew it on a head level, but not a heart level. And because you challenged me and you allowed me to challenge you and you didn't run when I disagreed with you or, I never said, well, listen, it's this way and you're going to have to live with it and like it. Or we always had open-ended conversations where we were allowed to challenge each other no matter if it got tense or not.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
what I'm saying? But because that challenged me, I started taking a look and started becoming aware of the things I wasn't paying attention to before. And I believe it was through that the Holy Spirit started to stir my heart and go, hey, I know you didn't know, but now it's time. It's time for you to see that this is something you have not been paying attention to. And it was on a much deeper level. It wasn't that spiritual milk level like Paul's talking about, and that's what we were talking about last week. Our ownership class, we hold you accountable to fulfilling those 5 core values, right? And we say, if you do these 5 things, this is what every Christian does to grow, to mature, to be spiritually healthy and to grow. But we likened it to being a parent and saying, okay, I had a kid, now I got to make sure I wipe my kid's butt and put a diaper on it. I got to feed it.
Which is the fun part.
You know what I'm saying? I got to protect it. I can't just leave it by itself.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? I've got to make sure that it sleeps, and gets rest. You know what I'm saying? And I've got to help it when it's hurt or cry because it can't help itself, And so you learn to do those 5 things. Well, when you get pretty good at those 5 things as a parent, just as you're getting pretty good at that, number 1, you don't like throw a celebration and graduate from parenthood and go, whoa, whoa, I did it, I know how to do all these 5 things now. That's just the beginning. That
Exactly.
just got you what you needed to know to get your foot in the door as a parent and move to the next level. The second thing is just as you master those 5 things, all of a sudden the kid has grown and evolved to a point where now you have to start doing all these other things.
Exactly.
You're like, dang it, I just figured these out. Now I got to do these. Now I got to go make them eat solid food, and I got to teach them how to wipe their own butt, and I got to make them keep their own sleep schedule, and teach them how to protect themselves and take care of themselves. And then when you master those, there's all these other things like, now I got to deal with feelings and emotions and identity and finding self out and all this other stuff. And that's exactly how it is with the Christian life. We're talking to people and saying, hey, you got to learn these 5 things. And Paul's saying, hey, that doesn't make you a master Christian.
Exactly.
That's just spiritual milk. That's just so you will actually start growing and evolving, that you're healthy enough to move to the next level. And that's what my relationship with you did for me. It made me realize we're chasing after, hey guys, let's celebrate that you are drinking spiritual milk. You guys are doing the 5 things. Yay, you.
Yeah.
And then just leave them alone. You know what I'm saying? All right, well, now that you're getting your butt wiped and you're getting fed and you're getting somewhere to sleep and you're getting taken care of and protected, rest is up to you to figure out. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing. And then we wonder why these guys don't know the word, why they don't know the teaching, why they don't know the doctrine. Because it is our job to stick by them and equip them until they're at a point where they can take off and do it on their own. And Jesus knew in year 1.5, in year 2, even though they had seen all the miracles and the healings and listened to all the teachings time and time again, he knew they weren't ready. He knew, nope, I still got to be here. And when they were ready to take it on their own, when they had moved to the next level and ready to go, that's when he ascended. It wasn't by accident that he ascended to the Father when he did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't by accident that he died when he did and he was raised when he did.
So I've been thinking this question. What does a disciple mean to you?
To me, it means a fully, not a fully, it means a follower of Jesus Christ that is actively in an ongoing relationship where you are growing closer and closer, step by step, into the likeness of Christ.
Yeah. So I actually thought about this morning. That's why we were.
Yeah,
I didn't know this was going to come up.
Yeah.
I put on there. It's like for me, I wrote it down. I was like, to me, a disciple is someone who knows Christ, is growing in Christ, serving Christ, and shares Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, I think, and when I was thinking about it, because I was like, well, how do you get somebody from point A to point B, and really, you almost got to break it down to the point of, do they know Christ? And then once we get that part, because I think a lot of times, and we might even be guilty of this, we immediately want to, I'm going to use us because I don't know other churches really.
Yeah.
So, but I heard almost something very similar this week is what we do with we don't have members, we have owners type thing. So
He stole it from the same guy I did.
Okay, yeah. So, right, but we're really quick to go, hey, here's our next steps. Let's put you into an ownership class, right? Right? Well, you almost want to back, like, because I've started thinking about it. I'm like, why do I want to put you in an ownership class if I don't even know if you know Christ yet?
Yep.
So you almost want to step back and go, well, let's do this. Let's go and start here. Like, how did you come to Christ? All right, like, let's give you a class on how to study the Bible. Let's break this down to baby steps. And once you've gotten that baby steps and we're starting to see that you got it, well then, hey, now let's put you in this ownership class so we can actually develop.
Like a Bible basics type thing.
Yeah, and that way you're actually making sure before, not only that, I mean, think about the pressure you do. Like if somebody comes down in an altar call, and anybody knows me, I'm not a fan, but you come down in an altar call, they say this prayer, and then we're basically in front of the church going, welcome this new member.
Yeah.
Right? Well, we don't know that.
That's right.
Like I don't have the magical beanstalk beans that get you a vine to heaven, right?
Yep.
Like I don't have that.
And we don't know if that's what you want.
Exactly. and we don't even know. Maybe you got emotional because, one of the big things I took away from the Tuesday thing was the music, the lights, the stage.
I mean, man.
You
want to get saved if you were in a service with that screen in the background?
I have nothing bad to say.
Love Carl. Man.
While everybody else was singing, me being me, I was checking my pulse. I checked my heart rate, and the reason was
seeing if you were getting emotional.
I was,
yeah,
because you have the music reverberating. The speakers or the stage style speakers. You got the lights. You got a symphonizer. Lovely voices singing. They're singing about something you can relate to, and I'm like, I'm not an emotional person, so I'm like, well, my pulse is going up here, and so I'm looking around and I'm watching the people in the audience, and I'm like.
I was wondering why you were taking notes in your notebook while we were.
Yeah, I do. I take notes.
I'm just kidding.
I'm the reform guy. I'm the guy taking.
We're over here with heads high, and I look over, and you're over here.
I got notes because I'm always curious. Like that's part of my thing. I always observe. So, and I was like, well, this right here, this is how. And then if you get a guy that, I'm just from what I saw of Carl, he seems like he's a very eloquent speaker, very on point. So, but I could see how people would come in and go, I'm saved. This is me, right? Well, we don't know that yet.
Yeah.
I don't have a thermometer I can hit you with.
Yep. But you can also see how they walk out of church on Sunday, and on Monday they don't feel that way.
And that's
because they're back to their normal life.
And that's my question. So how do you, I really like the fact that they, listening to him, he's got all these next step programs. They got a discipleship program. I forgot what he called it. It's in my notes. But I was like, to me, I was like, I'm glad to hear that. That was something I was very happy to hear when I was there, was the fact that, hey, we actually have a plan in place to ensure these people are locked in.
And he does, man. And here's the thing, we talked about our style versus their style, but ever since I've known that dude, he's a leader. He is a good leader. So he is going to think things through. He is going to have a plan. He is going to think about people and what they need and what they want, know. And so I was with you. I wasn't shocked, like I knew him to be that guy because I know him. But it was good to hear them talk about in that kind of detail too. That they have sat and had those conversations and thought that through.
Which is, to me, it made me feel better because anybody's ever heard me, I always say the fact that I think the Mormons are so much better than Christians as far as integrating people into their churches because. I don't know many churches that we have 17-year-olds we call elders and send them out to preach the word.
Right.
And I know you're going to say, well, that's a cult. Okay, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just pointing out the fact that they have a system in place that seems to work very well.
Yeah. I'm not saying you have to agree with their beliefs, but if they're doing something right.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Steal it.
and as we've been going through and re-looking at reflowing our discipleship program, trying to be intentional about we did it. I actually went back and I blew the dust off, but I found the old Soto Zen lineage, how they do theirs. I went back, I looked at onboarding processes from great companies, and I was like, well, what's the common denominator? What are we looking at here? And the one thing I took away, and I'm giving away part of my stuff here, so if it works for you, congratulations. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to leave that. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Anyway,
suckers. No, I'm just kidding.
But I started noticing things, and I was like, we can do this. This is completely doable. And not only can you do it, you have people who are passionate about it, but then rediscovering people who have become status quo with their faith and getting them to rediscover why they gave their life to Christ to begin with, and what does it mean? Like very important questions. And I had a couple of questions here, and we'll throw them out just because we're doing it. Like what is the role of a church currently, and how do they connect to discipleship? Like what exactly are you doing to intentionally disciple people? I think it seems simple.
Well, I think many years ago, churches started crossing the line on this same question about groups.
Hey, I don't have COVID. That donut
that's
still
good.
wrecking havoc
That
on
donut,
me.
that COVID donut. No, I'm just kidding. But because this was the same question they had about groups, you know what I'm saying? And the answer ended up being you can't be a church with groups. You have to be a church of groups. Like groups has to be a part of, fellowship has to be a part of your church fiber. It can't be a program that you do on the side. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's the same thing here. Discipleship can't be a program that you put people through on the side. It has to be a part of who you are as a church. It has to be just as much, if not more, than all the other things that you know what I'm saying? Like if you have an outreach program, you want people in the church to get involved in the outreach program. You don't just go, well, you're gifted for outreach, so go do outreach. No, if you're gifted for outreach, more times than not, they want you to lead in that area. But you want everybody in the church to come help in the community. Do you know what I'm saying? I know you're the drummer for the band, but you can go help us, build houses or pack lunches or stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like you want people to come and help because outreach is a part of who the church is. And I think discipleship for the longest time has not been. It's this little side class. When you're ready, you go take these classes, and then when you're done and you complete the said classes or said weeks or whatever, then you come back into the fold and you move forward into.
Yeah, but if you're looking at like what are the characteristics of a disciple, right? Like a disciple is someone who worships, they're part of a community, they commit to actual spiritual practice, which I heard that is one of the opportunities for a church that was there was I think we need spiritual development was one of the one of the things, and I'm like, well, yeah, committing to spiritual practices lines up. Generous and serves and seeks to be Christ-like, right? You've already said that. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, how do you break that down? Like, what is worship? A maturing disciple begins to worship every day, including the Sabbath. They start inviting other people to church, right? Mm-hmm. Community. You build a relationship with others. You share life with the community, as we do with link groups, which we like. I always tell people I probably wouldn't be part of the church if it wasn't for a link group, because you get to see people and they're like their natural habitat.
Natural habitat. That's right.
And you get to see it. Are these people? Are these people really holy, or are they jacked up, or what is the case? You get to find out a lot really quickly.
Yeah, because you can't you can put on a mask on Sunday, but you can't just keep on doing it every week.
No, not at all. And then spiritual practice. Do they actually enjoy and practice spiritual discipleship or discipline? And are they able to begin to show how they use them to grow their faith and draw closer to God? I mean, these are observable things so far, right? And then generosity. Do they tithe? Do they give beyond their tithe? Are they volunteering to go do like we do, pack the bags and pack the lunches like we do? And in Christ-like, are they partners with God? Do they invite people to explore the life teachings of Jesus? Are
they taking on His characters and His attributes?
Are we seeing
do they look like they're changing and being set apart and blank?
But I think wisdom plays into that too. Like I think as church people, and not even just pastors, but people in church, that discernment to go, is this person really reflecting Christ in their life, or are they not? I think that's where it gets to. And then you got to get into where I like, somebody like me comes in and go, is it the image that you've created that you think Christ-like should be like, or are they actually Christ-like? Because that's two completely different things.
Totally, right.
Like we have this perfect image, and we're like, here you go, this is what we need to do. And then we're like, oh, they don't live up to that standard. Well, neither do you.
Yep. You're right.
So,
I think that's why relationships are so important too, because if you don't see that knowing someone and them knowing you is the only way to really know how you can invest in their life and serve them, and how they are going to be able to invest in you and serve you, you'll make those shoot from the hip decisions. You'll meet a person in church on Sunday and go, well, I'm going to make my decision on who this person is based on this one encounter that I have
Exactly.
right here. Do you know what I'm saying? And if that be the case, there's a lot of people in my life I wouldn't have patience with, or would be kind to, or loving to, or gentle with. But knowing that, okay, just because this is the first encounter doesn't mean I'm seeing the real them, or humility makes you aware of the fact that they're probably not seeing the real you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And
Or
so,
wisdom, just true wisdom.
Yeah. And so, but and that's the thing. In that you develop a purity of heart that assumes the best and goes, okay, let me be patient in this time. Let me be kind. Let me be gentle. Let me be faithful to trusting God. Maybe I don't know all that's going on in their life. Maybe they don't know all
Well,
that's
and
going on
I
in
think
mine.
that also
That's
comes
type
with
of-
like spiritual maturity too. I think, it's like I like to say, you have that cage stage form of Calvinism, which luckily my cage stage didn't last that long, but I did go through it, where you just want to go out there and beat people over the head with the Bible and be like, "You're a sinner," right?
Yep.
And then as you're spiritual, you grow in your maturity. You look back and go, "I was that idiot one time
Yep.
too," right? Like I did that.
Yep.
And then you can actually you're like, God brought me through this, so why wouldn't God bring him through this, right?
Right,
So,
right.
and that's the other thing too. Like we sit here and we like to think that, well, I did this in 18 months or whatever the case is, and I was a completely different human being. So why is it taking you 5 years? Okay, well, you have different sets of gifts and a different set of everything. You can't hold everyone to a standard of a lead pastor or a teaching pastor.
Right.
And let's be honest, some lead pastors and teaching pastors probably took a very long time to get to where they were too.
Of course they did.
So we're not
for
all
me,
Steve Lawsons.
Yeah,
you know?
my journey was a whole lot longer than yours. But I also knew that mine had to do with what God's plan was for my life,
Yeah.
and yours has to do with what God's plan is for your life. And the only reason that I would have any negative thoughts about you being a lot further in 18 months than I was in 5 years would be because of me. That'd be my own personal insecurities,
Yeah.
my own jealousy, and it would be me not trusting God. And so wisdom in my faith and growing in my faith has taught me, listen, whatever God does is right. So if this is the path He's chosen for him, you know what I'm saying? You have to be okay with it because God's okay with it. And it's because He's achieving God's will for his life. He's achieving God's plan. And that's the thing. I know God sent you here to help us grapple with things like this. You know what I'm saying? And so if He doesn't grow you and change you in the 18-month period, you're not where you need to be.
When you're ready.
Right. And so then as a lead pastor, I benefit from you coming here, sent by God, growing into the change that you have in 18 months. You know what I'm saying? If you're not ready because you haven't grown to that point yet, does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that makes
If
sense.
you're not ready to do what God's called you to do, well, we suffer from it because we benefit from you being changed and being ready to do what God's putting you to do. You know what I'm saying? So either way, I win.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and the
because
other
we're
is-
both a part of the same thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another thing that, me and Bubba have talked about before too. I think a lot of times people we forget backgrounds, and I think that's one of the reasons why. Like if we even take Peter and Paul, right? So Peter does a lot of stupid stuff, right? No one can deny that.
Yep.
Peter does some really stupid stuff.
Yep.
But through being hardened by Christ, he ends up being one of these really one of the pillar. He is probably the pillar of the church, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you take fisherman comes in, be's one of the pillars. You take Paul, somebody whose background was in theology, it's in Pharisee, it's in the Hebrew text. He understands the Gentile culture.
He's
he
Roman
understands
citizen,
Yeah.
yeah.
You have all of this. Well, when Christ comes to him, he was already light years away
Yep.
on a foundational point than Peter was.
Totally.
Doesn't make Paul any better than Peter.
Nope.
And even he even proved that. Look later on in the books when Peter goes, whatever Paul says is right. And I know it's hard for you to understand because it's hard for me to understand.
Right.
But Peter understood, I'll never understand what Paul understands.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But Paul probably sat there and said, well, I'll probably never have the heart of a Peter. So you complement one another, but you're filling a role that God's given
Right.
you. So, you take two guys like me and Sam, and I know people probably get tired of hearing me and Sam get compared, but this is what happens when you're interns.
Yeah.
You take somebody like Sam who, was way out in left field in a life of sin. You take somebody like me who's sitting in a temple meditating and reading all the time. Well, clearly we have two different skill sets, right? And so when you're going through it, you're going into it, and I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. Oh, and for me, and I know this makes Christians mad, but I'm going to go ahead and say it again. There's a lot of stuff that goes through the Bible that I've read in other books, which just shows the greatness of the Bible. It's not taken away from the Bible. I think people misunderstand that when I say that. But like when I've read the Bhagavad Gita and other things, and I'm like, oh, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
It's reinforcing it, and you're like, boom, I know exactly what that means. And not only do I know what that means, I know what this religion thinks that means. So then you have a wider variety of, hey, I know what this means. So when you hear stuff, it catches on. Now, here's the difference. There's things that I read, and I'll fly right by it. Sam will read, and Sam will intimately know it because it relates to his life.
Yep.
And he can talk about certain topics in the Bible that I'm like, how do you know that? Like, there's times he catches me off guard and says something, and my head whips, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, me too, man.
And
he does me the same way.
And it blows me away, but it's two different styles of coming to the Bible than like if you take Bubba, me and him have conversations all the time, where I'm going to take the Reformed point of view, and Bubba's going to take, well, no, man, this is what it means to me. Who's wrong in that situation? No one. Because at the end of the day, it's your walk of faith. It's your spiritual journey.
Yep.
If you read the Bible and this is what it says, and it means that to you, then if my view, which I've probably read and cross-referenced and referenced and cross-referenced and read 5 or 7 commentaries on, okay, well, I know what these great theologian pillars say, but if you read that and that means something to you and it's getting you where you're supposed to go, well, unless it's heretical, I don't know what I'm supposed to do to step in that and go, no, that's wrong.
Okay, and well, of course, too, if you do, you're making assumptions because we're working out our faith, and part of us working out our faith is having those conversations, expressing those doubts and those reservations, talking through. That doesn't mean that you don't have faith or that you're believing something else. It means you're working out why you believe what you believe, which, like we said in the beginning, that tempers and purifies your faith because now you have more confidence in it because your brother has helped you work it out, and you are different people. Why would you not have different views on stuff as you're growing? But what we also know is as you grow, God is working out what your faith is to line up with you being in the likeness of Christ.
Yeah.
And so the more mature we become, the more we're going to start agreeing with each other and sounding like each other and thinking like each other. Because it's not thinking like each other, it's both of us thinking and acting and feeling and believing like Christ.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And so we have that trust. Listen, even if we disagree right now, and as long as we're working on it, working out our faith, whichever one of us it doesn't line up with God, no matter what we think, we're wrong. And whichever one of us lines up with God, you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're both eventually going to get there because our God doesn't leave us hanging. Yeah. He reveals to us the truth.
Yeah, and if Pete, if you're watching this, I just want to point out, he agreed with me. Baptism means submerging.
Yeah. The word literally means to dip underwater. Yeah. So baptismo literally means dip underwater.
I actually pulled up the word and showed it to him. I'm like,
yeah.
But anyway,
Christ was dipped underwater.
Yeah. I love Presbyterians. But my point is, the fact that even that, right? So, and this is what me and Bubba were talking about the other day was, we let these little small things like you thinking somebody needs to be sprinkled, where I'm like, well, the word means submerge. And people will get in fights over this.
Oh, yeah,
and then
man.
you don't want to talk instead of just going, all right, man, cool. Well, you can sprinkle, I'll submerge, man. Do you still know Christ is the only way to heaven? Yes.
Yep.
Do you believe he lived a perfect and sinful life? Yes. You believe he died on the cross for your sins? Yes. Do you believe he was buried and raised on the 3rd day? Yes. All right, man. Well, we'll work on the rest.
Yeah, exactly. And we call them essentials.
Yeah.
There are essentials, like a triune God. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Christ died on the cross and was resurrected 3 days later. I mean, you know, these are essential things we have to agree on. But then non-essentials, we have liberty on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, is drinking okay? Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely not.
But that's what I'm saying. That's one that people have a big controversy over. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, you can even get into like things like that too. So, like if you're looking at the Ten Commandments, because it depends on what version you're reading. You have "Thou shalt not murder," and then you have "Thou shalt not kill." Mm-hmm. Right. Well, you could be.
Those are two different words.
You could be me, and like, because I actually made somebody mad yesterday because they were trying to justify all the hamburgers, these disgusting hamburgers they eat, and I was like, well, technically, the commandment is "Thou shalt not kill." So if I was to take, what, most of your other religions say, that means kill. That means to kill life. That would be killing animals. And then the people are like, no, it's murder. They get all mad, like instantly, right?
Yep.
And then they start coming up with every defense that you want to do. And I'm like, no, but you're not hearing me out. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying there's a difference in kill and murder. And if I said "Thou shalt not kill," well, then that would fall into the precept of a Buddhist precept of "Thou shalt not harm," which means they don't try to harm anything.
Right.
So, but kill, right? And if Jesus was the perfect sacrifice, all right, well, why are we killing animals?
Yep.
And then people are like, oh, well, now I've offended anybody who eats meat. Okay, but then you could actually say, okay, well, let's remove all of this. And let's just go, well, what is the intent of when you kill? All right, are you murdering somebody, or were you trying to kill me and I defended myself and killed you? Well, death happened regardless, right?
Right.
But what was the intent of your heart in the situation?
Totally.
So then you can get into a whole different philosophical debate, but for me, I already saw the temperament of the person I was talking to, so
Right.
I was like, why not? Push the button.
Yeah.
And to see where it goes. But I think a lot of times, like, we don't think about these things, and then when people start thinking about it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, killing anything is probably not the best thing in the world. Now here comes the benefit of it. Do you eat meat? And they'll be like, well, I don't kill animals. Well, do you eat meat? And they'll be like, yeah. Well, then you're benefiting from someone killing an animal,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Well, yeah. Well, does that animal not deserve a right? Well, then eventually you'll have somebody go, well, plants are alive. And I'm like, do they have a heartbeat? No. Well, then why are we talking about it?
Yep.
But it's a never-ending conversation that can turn into a huge fight for no reason.
Yep.
And it's not relevant. And that's my argument. That was my argument I was making with her, but she
Right.
just kept going with it. I'm like, it's not relevant.
And that's the whole point of, we have to give each other liberty in things that don't affect our essential beliefs. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Because there is a uniqueness to everyone, know. None of us are the same. Even two twins, as close as they are, they and parents that live with them know the differences between the two. Every one of us is unique. Do you know what I'm saying? And so because of that, you have to have liberties to be able to see things in your unique way, so that it doesn't become a distraction from you having an encounter with Christ, growing on a deeper level with Him, and learning to trust Him. Because against Christ, you can bring up everything. Whereas, let me give you an example. I may believe something that to me is right and to you is wrong. And then you may have another thing that you think is right and I think is wrong. And they're two totally different things. We measure them against Christ, and on one of them, I line up with Him, and the other one I don't, right? Well, then what happens is, as I grow closer to Christ, the one that I don't line up with, I end up lining up with Him because I realize He's right. He is truth. You know what I'm saying? Now, I line up with Him on both of those. You, on the other hand, you line up with Him on the one I didn't, and you don't line up with His truth on the one I did. As you grow to Christ, you begin to live out His truth as well. Now you line up with Him on both of those. We both now line up with Him, not because we convinced each other to be like each other, but because we both measured ourselves against Him. It's not up to us when those things are worked out. If it's a non-essential thing, that's between you and God to work out, because it's not something that He says we need. In other words, we can have those things as uniqueness and still have biblical community and have unity with each other. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying. For me, once again, background makes a big difference. I have zero like comparisons. Like I'm not the guy that's ever going to compare myself to anyone. It's just it's my nature.
Course.
I just don't care. Now, having said that, see, I'm of the belief that we should actually fast every month, not just once a year. Like, I think there should be fasting done every month, and realistically, you should probably do it at the beginning of the month to go ahead and get it out of the way. But that's a belief that I have. That's not a belief that I would tell a disciple, hey, well, I might, but that I probably would go out of my way and be like, hey, man, you make sure you're fasting.
Yeah.
And then the question
if they ask you about it.
Well, why would I fast? Well, I mean, you're relying on Him.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why wouldn't you fast?
Right.
I mean, you're putting your faith in Him, and you're going to fast, not just at the beginning of the year. You should realistically do it monthly, at least a 3 to 5 day fast of just, hey, I'm going to rely on you, God, for these 3 to 5 days. I'm going to fast. I'm going to pray. I'm going to do what I need to do. And I think it should be done monthly. Anybody knows I do them monthly, so it's not like I'm just saying it. So we do them, and in that way you're keeping that balance and that humbleness and everything into it. And I think another thing is like, for me, we're reducing the consumption of food to where you're not eating. It puts where you're relying on Christ for your strength. It gets you mentally correct where you're going to be at. It makes you more self-control, self-discipline, I guess, is the other big one that comes into people. Don't like to mention that discipleship, discipline kind of goes hand in hand. But if you can have self-control on not eating, or maybe your fasting is, I'm not going to take this phone with me. It's going to sit here on this table, and I'm not going to touch it.
Right.
Whatever your fasting's got to be, but
it goes back to the motives of your heart, like you were saying before.
Breaking down things where you develop self-control, you're developing disciplines, you're developing things that not only help you be a better Christian, but help you be a better human being to society in general. And I think a lot of times people don't forget that those two go together. The early church wasn't just great Christians, they were great human beings.
Yep.
These were people who were like, I know the truth has set me free of my sins, and I want to share that with you.
And that's what full submission does, though. When you fully submit to Christ, He doesn't make you wait until this life ends to transform you into great human beings. You know what I'm saying? You get to live this life. It might not be according to the world standards.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's not free from suffering, but He does transform you in your heart and by the renewal of your mind into a great human being, because you become about Him and other people. Mother Teresa said, I'm not trying to please God with my success. I'm trying to please Him with my faithfulness. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're being faithful, He turns you into somebody that you can't turn yourself into on your own. And that has to come through full submission. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And that's the whole thing that I was talking about earlier. You don't have to worry about who you are, who anybody else is. You got to stop trying to fight battles about these non-essential things. That's not your battle to fight.
Exactly.
Do you know what I'm saying? That's God's, in that ongoing relationship with another person. God is the one that can change and stir hearts in any issue, essential or non-essential. You can't do it. Do you know what I'm saying? We are called to do it in the essentials. Like, we can't have unity if we don't agree that we believe in the same things that are essential to our faith. Do you know what I'm saying? Because we're unequally yoked. So we are called to accountability in that, not just from Him, but from brothers and sisters in Christ.
Absolutely.
As well. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that. But in the non-essential things, that's not for you to work out for someone else. If you are, that's pride. You're putting an authority on yourself that doesn't belong to you. You know what I'm saying? Because that person's not going to submit their will because you convinced them to. They're going to because God shared with them that they need to in their heart, and they willingly give up they submit to Him. And I think that's a Christ control, like 1 Corinthians 5:14 says. I think His love controls us to become that person that fully submits to Him. You know what I'm saying? And I think so many people think that they are fully submissive to the Lord, and I think that's where they get deceived. I think the deceit of your heart is this, because I've given him 30% control over parts of my life, I'm fully submissive. And he,
Yeah.
and I don't think people grasp in their mind, and you don't unless you dive in this word. You just don't really grasp in your mind, dude, this is all in, like nothing left. 24/7, 365, every moment, every minute. That's the goal. I'm trying to give every moment of my life to him. I'm not saying that I've done it. I'm not saying that anybody that's listening in our church has done it, but I'm saying that doesn't mean it's not the goal.
Yeah, I
Do
mean,
you know what I'm saying?
it truly is. You know, I mean, and for me, once again, that concept is easy because if you're, like I've always said, if you become a true meditating practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, meditation starts to be, you can literally make it everything you do. You can be cleaning the dishes and you're in a meditative state.
Yep.
Everything you do, it becomes part of who you are. So and once again, it goes back to that discipline of the person too. If you're truly working on your sanctification, which we should.
Yep.
It's not hey, I get saved here and 5 years later I start working. It's
Yep.
You're saved and you start being sanctified,
Yep.
right? So
I think most people think that the gospel is what saves, and then out of that, you have to put in the work to become sanctified. I think the gospel sanctifies as much as it saves.
absolutely,
You know what I'm saying?
it's also a refresher. I mean, I think anybody who ever thinks they've outgrown the gospel, you're deluding yourself.
Yeah. Or if you
know.
don't need it every day.
Yeah, yeah. If you think you've outgrown it, but anyway, well, I forgot what. But if while you're
sorry.
being sanctified, you're fine. But it probably wasn't that important. As you're growing, I mean, you should really start seeing Christ should be in everything you're doing. Like I read it to our Bible study group all the time. Because people will be like, I had a bad day at work. I'm like, well, were you working for your boss? You working for God?
Said the same thing.
And people will be like, well, I mean, God doesn't pay me. I'm like, God does pay you. Like, God lets you breathe.
Yep.
If God wanted to tomorrow, he could just, your
Yep.
heart's over. I mean,
Yep.
it's like.
He could take away your ability to do the work that you do get paid for.
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, you do. And we, same thing. I pull up all the verses where it says, do your work as you are doing it for Christ. These are the things that we have to do. Once you really are integrating Christ into every aspect of your life, well, it makes your life so much easier because now you're living with purpose. Like when we start talking about depression and anxiety, as I like to say, depression, you're living in the past, anxiety, you're living in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You're not focused on this. And, as a Zen guy, I should be sitting there telling you, be in the present moment, Zen, but at the same time, though, your past built you to who you are.
Yep.
And I don't think people realize that. The trials you went through in your life, I don't care if it was you were raped, beaten, you had unloving parents, whatever the case is, that molded you into a particular human being that you are.
And who you're becoming.
Yeah. So now with Christ, you have a certain set of skills, a certain side of resourcefulness, a certain type of whatever, but you can appreciate what came from the past, but you're not depressed. We're not clinging to our past mistakes or these past hardships. You accept them and you let them go, and you let that build you to the future. And I think that's something people don't get. It's like we want to keep holding on to the past and holding on to the past.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
You're going to waste your life focused back there.
Yeah,
if you're not
embrace
looking
it and move
forward.
on. Yeah, and let
hey,
it
this
go and move
happened.
on.
Let me move on.
Yep.
And then as far as the future anxiety, like I always tell people, like if you integrate Christ in every part of your life, you're building a future. It's not one that you're even going to see coming. Like it's not even anything. I don't even need to know what I'm aiming. Like I'm building this path. Now, I'm not ever going to say don't have a goal because as Zig Ziglar says, if you don't have something to aim for, you'll hit it every time, right?
Yep.
So you got to be aiming, but your goal might be here, but God's going to take you to here.
Yep.
And you just got to be prepared for that. And I think, people just get so thin, but dude, just do it daily. Become a daily thing.
What's funny too is this is what when he talks about testing of your faith, this is what he's talking about. You should want your faith to be tested so that you know that it stands up, that it's tempered, who you are, you know what I'm saying? And what's so funny is when we worry about the future and it doesn't happen, you go, how lucky was I, like that. And
There was
you're
no
like,
luck to begin with. It was never going to
no,
happen.
it was always never going to happen. Yep. Just because you worry about it didn't mean that was going to, it made it an option, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And then if it does happen, you do what you have to do to endure it and go through it, you know what I'm saying? Yep. And you come out the other side. So either way, you really have no reason to be worrying about it to begin with. And that's something that Jesus teaches you, he points
6.
out.
Yeah, and that's what I always go to Matthew 6 because the Sermon on the Mount to me, hit me like I guess it did Gandhi, where Gandhi read the Sermon on the Mount and was like, I like your Christ, I don't like your Christians.
Yep.
Because, and there's no one who can argue the Sermon on the Mount.
Of course.
It's been tried. People have tried to dissect it. Some of the greatest wisdom that has ever been given to the world was from Matthew 5 into like, all the way to 6, and then even really going into 7.
I mean, mine keeps on going,
Yeah, but there's such great wisdom, and I'll never forget it. I actually was reading a thing where Gandhi said, if I just had to judge the deeds of Christ on the Sermon on the Mount, I too would say I'm a Christian. And he was like, and you're like, this is a Hindu, priest over here. And he's like, this is all I had to judge it on, this is what I would be. And the thing is like, Jesus really summed up a lot of things in there, but the one big thing, and it lined right up to an old Zen phrase where there's only 2 days on the calendar that are useless. They're absolutely pointless. It's called yesterday and tomorrow. Yep. Today's the only one that really matters.
Seize the day. That's
if you're not going to go and study the Word today, you're not going to do it tomorrow. If you're not going to go and pray today, guess what? You're not going to do it tomorrow. If you're not going to go and start being Christ-like to people, being Jesus with skin on, as we like to say, you're not going to do it tomorrow.
Right.
You're never going to do it. And then guess what? Tomorrow will become yesterday, and tomorrow will become yesterday, and tomorrow will become yesterday. And that vicious cycle of you growing up, getting old, and dying, never living your life, never having a purpose, never doing anything has happened to you because you never really even tried.
Of course. And I think worry and anxiety because of that just paralyzes you. And you don't even know it. You know what I'm saying? It just keeps you locked into that cycle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It is. It's a trap. It's one of the greatest traps I think the devil ever created was, how could I keep you depressed and how could I keep you worried about leaving your house?
Right.
If you wanted to paralyze, and people can go, well, not a Christian. I'll go, all right, well, how many people are at your church on Sunday? How many people are tuning in online that they've already broke the cycle, the routine of going to church? That was one thing that Carl said. He goes, when I look at our online numbers, it frustrates me because you know what your church size is. You know what's there and you know what's turning in. And it's not
half
matching.
of them ain't coming, but they're not online.
It's not matching.
Yes, right.
So and as Carl said something else that I truly believe, and I heard it somewhere else. We have no idea what the implications of this year-long lockdown has been, and we won't know for another 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
We don't know the mental damage that's been done. We don't know the habits of people who were lifelong Christ followers and going to church every Sunday, who built that habit of going to church every Sunday, who now have new habits that don't involve going to church on Sunday.
I agree, yeah.
We have no idea what the long-term implications of this is going to be. And if we don't systematically sit down and look at it and go, okay, well, how do we get our sheep back into the building?
Yeah.
And how do we grow? We're going to see big issues because we've now let depression, anxiety, and fear be the dominating force in the country instead of hope.
Right.
And hope and glory and praising God. We've now allowed these evil things take over what should be good.
Right.
And it's depressing.
I had a guy yesterday.
I don't know what that means, though.
No. You're exactly right. And to your point, I had a guy yesterday that said to me, he was at the conference with us, and he said to me, man, when you said that most of your people returned, when you guys started meeting again, you guys were lucky because that goes well higher against the national average. Most people are seeing 30 to maybe 50% of their attendance come back. And which, of course, we're a small church, a very small church. So that was one factor that played in it. But I think the other factor I don't think it was luck at all. I think because we emphasize growing in Christ, because we emphasize doing life together, because we emphasize being a church family and a church body, because we emphasize people plugging into the church outside of the Sunday service, because everything is not surrounded, centered around that building and that one service, even though we have a lot of things to work on and a long way to go, and I'm not saying we got it all figured out. Like we said, we believe we're just at the birthing stages of figuring out a true discipleship process for people, in their journey. But I think because that's what we're chasing after, that is one of the reasons why most people came back, because we're intentional about letting people know relationships matter to you growing in Christ. You taking that steps matter. Us gathering together in person biblically matters, and Absolutely. We're teaching these things. Giving matters. Serving people and caring for people matters. And our people have experienced it. And because of it, we have very little people, numbers wise, that are not able to come back. And a majority of those folks do check us out online, even though our online numbers are low. It's because we have a small percentage of our people that didn't start coming back and meeting with us. And I attribute that to discipleship more than I attribute it to luck. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm saying. If you can have that kind of turnaround just because you're trying to figure out a discipleship process, how much more effective can it be when you figure it out?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So, well, guys, listen, we could go on forever about this right here, and I have actually thoroughly enjoyed the conversation that we've had today.
Yeah, we got nowhere near through James.
Yeah, but
welcome to my brain.
Yeah, but it did also have to do with him talking about wisdom and testing our faith. And at least that's what I'm going to say so that we can kind of keep this linked in. So, but I do want to point out one thing. You guys are not going to be with me when I get to hear what Pastor Jerry was going to say on camera, and now he's going to tell me. So, stinks to be. I'm just kidding. We love you guys, and we thank you for being with us today and sharing your time with us. We hope that you will make plans to join us next week. Like we said, if you have any questions or comments, if you'll go ahead and put those in the comment section, we'll follow up with you as soon as possible. And if you don't have a church or you would like to come to church, we would love for you to come and join us at Destination Church at 136 Hood Street Art Center in McDonough, Georgia. We meet on Sundays at 10 a.m. and we are going to continue the series that we're walking through right now on the book of James. So we hope that
Sam is preaching.
Pastor Sam is preaching this Sunday, right? And so it is going to be a great day. I'm looking forward to it because
he said
Pastor
it's under
Sam,
an hour and 30 minutes. I'm so proud of him.
It's a Jerry message. No, that's our Pastor Ricky message. No, I'm just kidding. Well, guys, we love you. We hope that you stay safe. Stay safe and have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday. If not, we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us.